Over to you.
All right, we are live on the YouTube.
All right, everybody. Welcome to House Energy and Digital Infrastructure. It is Tuesday, May 20th. And we are here learning about Rygate to prepare for a amendment that the Senate is considering to H319. So we'll just quickly go around the room, committee members, and introduce ourselves. And then we'll have everybody in the room quickly introduce themselves, and then we'll turn it over to you for the record. So I'm Representative Kathleen James from the Bennington 4 District.
Chris Morrow, Wyndham, Windsor, Bennington.
Michael Southworth, Caledonia 2.
Christopher Howland, Rutland 4.
Darren Torrey, Washington 2.
Graham Klubner, Chittenden 13, Burlington.
Laura Sibilia, Wyndham 2.
Representative Campbell.
Hello, it's Scott. I'm Scott Campbell, representative from St. Johnsbury. You are a hard-working crew. I'm just starting.
Thanks, Rep. Campbell. And now just quickly around the room.
Hey, Beverly, Forest Parks and Recreation.
Warren Homewood, MMR here with Rygate.
Debbie Powers,
Pat McMahon with MMR with Rygate.
Okay.
Jed Lipsky, Lamoille 1 District, interested party, member of the House Ag and Forestry Committee.
Oliver Drewson, Forest Parks and Recreation.
Gwen Zakoff, the Vermont Forest Products Association.
Great. All right. For the record, we'll turn it over to our first witnesses. If you could identify yourself. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. My name's Liddy Carter with Rygate Associates. And this is your reflection.
And Dan St. Ange. I helped purchase the wood and keep Rygate going.
Great. All right. So as you know, we're considering a proposed Senate amendment that would give Rygate a one-year extension potentially, and we're curious to hear your thoughts.
Thank you so much for having me and Dan today. I'm with Rygate. The reason I'm the new owner of Rygate as of about now 3 weeks ago is that we were the lender. My company is called Mizzen Capital, and we are a small business investment company licensed by the Small Business Administration to make loans to US-based small operating businesses that are providing goods and services that are good for their communities. That's our mandate. It's a 70-year-old program from the SBA. And it's really meant to address a financing gap in the United States for companies that need growth capital. This isn't a venture capital fund. It's really just about operating businesses that need to borrow some money and can't get it from a bank. And so we've been running this. I've been doing this kind of lending for about 20 years. And every now and then.
Sorry about that.
Someone.
Yes.
I just need to figure out how to mute.
Excuse us.
There you go.
Okay. There you go.
Every now and then we get the unusual opportunity to own one of the companies that has borrowed money from us. And that's what's happened with Rygate. And these opportunities happen when essentially the borrower can no longer operate the plant. And that's what happened with Rygate. Essentially, we're excited about having the opportunity to run Rygate because it has a lot of potential. It's doing something that's essential for the community. And my background as an engineer makes me just really excited about having a plant to run. I love doing this stuff. But my big job is to try and figure out what they were unable to achieve, which was the 50% efficiency upgrade to the plant, which enabled the plant to have a power purchase agreement through 2032. We are not here asking for a change to that term. What happened to the plant is they spent the last 2 years working aggressively to figure out how to achieve this 50% upgrade. It's not an easy thing to do. This is a complicated factory built years ago, as I understand it, by Christopher's company, Stoner Webster. But it was years ago, right? 30 some years ago, 35. Plant's been around a long time, producing power 24/7. And a 50% upgrade in efficiency is a significant investment. It's significant technological change. The the work that the prior owners had done was impressive and entailed economic investments that were significant. To buy equipment from Europe that's state of the art. In Europe, it's very common to retrofit and also to build all new plants with the use of the essentially excess heat coming off of the plant, which is the goal to upgrade the efficiency of the plant. The plan is almost always use the excess heat for a beneficial purpose. For a variety of reasons, the prior owners had chosen, and I want to be very clear, they are prior owners. They own nothing, have no economic interest and no management control at all in the plant at this time. The plan was to extract heat and dry wood chips and then sell those wood chips to a third party, which was going to be a buyer to make particle board in Canada. We were on the verge of placing the purchase orders, and I had to sign off on those purchase orders because that was the economic arrangement since they were not performing on their loan. Unfortunately, in February, when the purchase orders needed to be executed in order to buy the equipment, there were also a lot of clarity of that the people who were selling us that equipment were financing it also. This was the United Bank of Switzerland and also the Export-Import Bank of Spain, which is where this equipment is produced, were unwilling to continue to make those loans. The tariffs increased the cost of that equipment substantially and also made it very, very difficult to even rely on the ability to import that equipment because I don't even know how someone sees this. It's considered technically very relevant. So that equipment was off the table suddenly, and those purchase orders were no longer useful to us. In addition, our expected, we have a letter of intent from the particle board company that was canceled. The 10% tariffs made it ridiculous to purchase down here, and they also were no longer willing to buy from an American company. So that plan, which had been in the making, as I said, for 2 years, and I will say at considerable expense, was no longer viable. And the prior owners decided that it was time to let someone else figure out what to do. So they handed us the keys, and that's where we are today. We have fortunately followed all the work that has been done. We know all the engineers, we've been involved, and we have a plan to execute this with equipment that we have now identified in the US. It's used. It's not ever been purchased, but it was never used because one plant in North Carolina bought 3 of these dryers. This is a wood chip dryer. It's big, long. I mean, I'm talking a 150-foot long dryer. This is not this big, and it's got a lot of fans on it. And it's in North Carolina in crates because they bought 3 of them and they ended up only using 2. And so the idea is to purchase one of those. And we're working on that agreement right now. And so we'll be able to get that up here. We also have to do some re-engineering of how we're going to extract the excess heat. Working on that. We have to change that technology also. It's very, very important to do that correctly, or you can cause an imbalance in the plant. I will say that the European technology is the most efficient that we've ever seen, but we're not getting there. We're going to be doing something different, and there are other alternatives. It's not optimal, maybe, but a lot cheaper, and that's going to be better for us and more accessible, more reliably accessible service. So what we're asking for is a year. We're asking for a year of the deadlines to get the equipment fully engineered with the new equipment, get our equipment delivered, installed, and do it right. If we had to make this kind of change, in other words, shift equipment at the 11th hour right now, is it possible? Yes. Could you screw it up? Yes. Would it be better to do it right? Take a little more time, do the planning, make sure everything's working, balanced. That's what we want. That's what we're asking for, is a year. I know that Rygate has gotten extensions before, and we're very grateful for those. And I know it can feel like a Groundhog Day. Rygate's back here again, asking for an extension. And it could be a reasonable question to say, why is this going to be different this time? There's a couple things. One is we have a plant that's operating well. And one of the main reasons it's operating well is that we have a consistent wood supply. This is Dan St. Ange, and I'd like him to address you all on what's happening with the wood at the plant and what's different now about what happened before it would plant for the wood at the plant.
So, yeah,
I have a quick question before we move on. You said the market was a Canadian company and they've canceled their LOI. So it sounded to me like there were two barriers: getting the equipment you need from Spain, now North Carolina, for the upgrade, but then the deal with the Canadian company that's off now. How will that be?
We have two choices. One is to get an additional revenue stream by selling dried wood chips, which means bring more wet wood chips into the plant, dry them, and sell them using the excess heat from the plant. That was the plan on the table before. What we're going to do now is bring exactly the same amount of wood chips, actually a little fewer wood chips than we were before. Hopefully, it'll all kind of balance out. It's the engineer we still have to do. You make the plant more efficient by burning the dried wood chips ourselves. So we're going to dry the wood chips, run those wood chips right into the plant. And that increases the efficiency of the plant because you go from 45% moisture content on wood to 30%, you're saving about 20%. Don't hold me to these numbers. Just as an example of the fuel that is otherwise used to burn off that moisture. Because if you put a wet log in your fire, you know it doesn't go so well. You have to put in all kinds of dry kindling to make that burn. Same thing. It's burned. And so if you put in dry wood, it burns beautifully. And that's what we're proposing to do. The reason that was not done before there were a lot of reasons, but financially, if you're going to spend on getting optimal equipment, you want to have the highest revenue stream. This will probably not give us the highest revenue stream, but it'll be enough to justify the investment in the plant. So we're stepping back a little, reevaluating that effort, and I think it'll be good also because it'll put less pressure on the wood basket, which is, constrained. There are times when the plant can struggle to get enough wood, and our plan is to use basically what we're using now, and just burn dry wood, so we become our own market.
Thank you, Representative Campbell.
Yes, thank you. So I have been to this plant and seen the operation. It's a humongous plant, and one of the things that really stuck in my mind was watching a front loader dumping chips in as fast as it could go to keep up with the need for the
200 tons an hour.
Yes. So the question that it prompts for me is, are you going to have an undercover storage facility as part of this in order to dry the chips and store them so that you have enough to keep up with the need for the boilers?
Representative Campbell, it's such a great question. And I will say that people have in my company are now spending a lot of time on evaluating that option. We believe it's at this moment where we are is to run a continuous process of drying rather than drying and storing. So we currently have all of our wood chips in a big pile. They don't stay there very long. They get used usually in a few days, and then they go into the plant, which is why it's a kind of a just-in-time inventory, and we really bulk up just before mud season. But then the wet wood chips go into a silo. Our plan right now is to take them out of the silo, just as we do today, dry them as they go essentially en route into the plant. So the plant is also then burning a wood chip that's warm as opposed to very, very cold sometimes in the winter. Again, it's all part of the thermal efficiency achieved with a different continuous feed process. So as opposed to the idea that you had, which is another way to go.
Yeah, I guess it was hard to imagine, but maybe that's what can happen. It's hard to imagine drying them on a continuous basis and well, as they're going to the boiler, but maybe I hope that's possible. That sounds like.
Oh, indeed, it's done. It's done. You need redundancy where you'd want at least 2 lines to make sure they're both going. But when you realize that part of eventually that has to balance out, right? Because even if you're going to store them, you have to have achieved enough drying.
Right.
To have, so.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And thank you. I just was curious about that.
Rob Clapper?
So just to make sure I'm clear on this, you're planning on using excess heat from the plant to dry the chips.
Right.
Before they go in. Got it. Thank you.
Rep Southworth?
And burning dry chips is gonna increase the efficiency of the plant too, correct?
Correct. Dan, would you like to talk about the wood chip supply and?
So I stepped into it about a year ago, just helping purchase the chips, keep it going because there was some skepticism,
Can
I
you
guess.
tell that what you do otherwise?
I own a trucking company from Northern Run. I do a lot of chipping. I'm not a logger myself. I chip for a lot of loggers that can't afford to have a chipper because it's a huge investment. So I go to them and I chip their wood and I pay them for their wood after I take out my chipping and my trucking and whatever plant I'm going to. I go to a lot of power plants around, not just Rygate. I'd like to just go to Rygate, but we can't on all of them. So I go to the logger and I pay him for the chips and I truck it. I do the whole part. And then Rygate weren't getting enough chips back with the previous owner. I was trying to help him out because he didn't have great views, I guess. So I took over helping, telling the loggers, I'll take care of paying you, bring the chips. And it's worked very well for a year. Like everybody gets paid every Friday or Tuesdays. I send a check out. Everybody gets paid every week. And it don't matter if it's 30,000 a week for a big logger or 800 for the little logger, just to now if you keep me coming and then it wouldn't come and I pay every week. And it's been that way. Boy, it's been just about a year solid that I've done that. And I've always made sure of that. And as my commitment, there were some loggers that weren't sure of it. And I actually brought them checks and prepaid them out of a couple of my own pocket. And I manage it and I try to keep the wood going. Very hesitant on coming and they period did not like the old owner. It didn't work. And I've been trying hard to make that work on my own. And the other plants I go to all got a chip buyer. I deal them all the time. They call me and ask me for chips all the time and they know I'm buying for Rygate and I still bring them a lot so it works well.
I think that was one of the questions that we wanted to make sure we got answered, was that the loggers are being paid, in full and paid on time. I know there'd been a lot of concern about that. You guys are statutorily required to submit audited statements.
which we do. We've just submitted the one for the first quarter. We have a process, we have to certify it, and then we have to send it to a third party for them to certify, the CPA firm, and do that.
It's been nearly a year now that I've been doing it, and every Tuesday, them checks go out every week. They all want to do ACH. I pay a lot of bills that way, but I haven't set up that way yet, but I send a check out, and there's some I personally still bring it to them, but they get paid every week, and I can tell you there's been a lot of weeks that my pocket took care of it in hopes that it would come. It came most all the time, but
Now we're changing that.
it's been
Yeah.
great since the new ownership, absolutely. But before that, I was eating a lot of that. I can tell you, I had a lot on the line. If they'd have closed their doors, I'd have been in some tough shape.
Right.
But it's worth it.
So I would assume Mizzen's bringing a level of capitalization that is gonna no longer require you to be paying loggers out of your own pocket.
That's already changed.
Yeah, it's been super good. It's weekly and it's not monthly and
Last year, in 2024, it was almost $9 million that was paid for wood chips.
Yeah, Rep. Sibilia?
Just to make sure we beat this horse, I mean, this is an imperative for many of us in the legislature, the payment of the lawyers. And Dan, I was not aware that you were doing that. So,
yeah,
And I will say that Mizzen, back when there was a crisis in 2023 and they were not paying, Mizzen stepped up, financed the payments to the loggers. So we have been actively engaged in modifying that behavior since that time.
there's a few people I know that are negative towards Rygate, the old owner, because of a lot of loggers in New England from the previous plants he owned weren't getting paid. And I can tell you, I got burned 80-something thousand. I was burned too. I know that. That's why I've stepped up here, and now that the other ones are out of the equation.
Just want to go back to the efficiency question. So are you saying the moisture content from 40 to 30 is enough to get the 50%?
No, sir, I didn't say that.
Okay.
It will make it more efficient. But we are doing several other things as well to achieve that efficiency. That's just the one that is most modified that was particularly affected by our need to purchase far and highly efficient equipment. The other efficiency upgrades, which are meaningful, are still occurring. We're undertaking those already. So I was at I just pushed the mud off my knees because I was crawling around this morning under a conveyor belt, looking at some of the other things we're doing. So, and it's a myriad of little things. Equipment upgrades. I don't think it's really helpful to go through the details, but happy to do that with you if you'd like to at any time.
Yeah, Rep. Southworth.
How many area loggers is that plants?
All area, like, I don't, there's over 100 on my list that I'm dealing with. I mean, there's a lot of heavy hitters, there's some smaller ones, but there's a huge amount. And again, I'm paying the ones in Mass, New Hampshire, Vermont. It's not just Vermont, it's the wood comes from everywhere. Obviously, we want wood from Vermont. There's a lot more I think we could get from Vermont if we changed other things as well. But right now, yeah, there's a lot of, it's truckers, it's the loggers, it ain't just 27 people sitting in that Rygate plant. There's a huge number of people.
Curious to know, just my final question anyway, curious to know what sort of the, what the end game is for Mizzen. You said it was unusual for you guys to actually own or take over the management of a company like this. And so is that 2 to 3 year thing where you get Rygate up and running and you're satisfied with it, and then you find an owner or buyer that you're comfortable with, or what? How do you guys look out on the horizon for when you take over operation of a plant like this as like a venture capitalist?
Yeah, so just because you're talking about finance to a finance person, it's like talking about snow to an Eskimo. We are not venture capitalists, so I want to be really clear about that. We are lenders. Venture capitalists deal with equity. We are now in an equity position, which to me is a very important distinction. And so our plan is to recover the loan we've made on that plant, which we will do eventually by selling it to a third party. There is no rush, however, for us to do that. Since we now own it outright, 100%, we have no partners to satisfy and no third parties to satisfy. It would be our intention right now to get that plant as efficient as it can be, to use the ancillary land. We have 50+ acres that are flat, fallow fields, not used for anything productive today. We believe there are several great opportunities that the plant can achieve there. I'm personally committed because I really believe in alternative uses of interconnections. And one of the opportunities there's a myriad of them. We've begun that work. So we'd like to see the plant fully built out. And while this was not our plan, we're kind of excited about it.
Yeah, sorry for that. I'm sure I used the wrong.
No,
Sure,
not at all.
but I did. Yeah, I was scooting over to your
Yeah.
LinkedIn to see it. I think I saw the word patient, so this is
Patient capital.
patient capital. Yeah, so that was it. That was interesting to me. Are you like a kind of a socially responsible lender?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, well, I work for one of those, but I'm new to the field too, so you're years ahead of me. I can tell.
Happy to
So
take that offline and talk.
many
about
of us, yeah, sure. Many of us have we have jobs in the real world.
I bet you do.
So
We
Representative
appreciate your
Allen.
service.
All the wood is trucked in, there's no railroad siding available.
The railroad site is available, but we don't use it right now.
And
It's all trucked in my trailers.
if they did come by rail, would they be dumpable right in with the same amount of handling? If when they come by,
We can adjust to do that if need be. But
and,
there's enough local wood right now, we shouldn't have.
and it's all forest wood, there's no scrap wood that comes from demolition or, any of it.
It's all the treetops that the loggers can't. And as tight as everything is in the world today, it's treetops. Like they get every inch of that they can.
There's no
What's left's the brush, and that's what I go in and chip.
Bar.
marketable wood. No wood is diverted from a better economic resource for your
No.
supply.
This is the lowest grade, what they would normally throw back in the woods and not utilize, or it rains, it goes in your rivers, floods them and builds them up. It's the junk you want to get rid of, and we put it to good use.
Thanks for bearing with my typing. I'm a note taker.
I appreciate
So,
that.
yeah, thank you for, I'm sorry, Rep Campbell.
Well, so thanks. That's an interesting question. So, Dan, is it Dan St. Ange? Would you say all of the wood, or maybe I should ask what proportion of the wood is coming from logging operations, and that would otherwise leave the wood that's being chipped in the forest, instead of chipping it and bringing it to the plant? So what proportion of the wood would be left on the forest floor anyway, I guess is what I'm asking.
I'd say, look here when you're talking, you're turning your back, you're
Yeah.
looking at oddly enough.
So I think asking is what percentage of the wood that currently gets chipped and is used at Rygate would have been wood that's left in the woods to rot.
I bet 70% of it would all go back in the woods, and to this day, there's still, with the approval process and everything, I know a lot of Vermonters that would let me come chip the wood, but because they don't have the right practice to get it managed right, they're not shipping it. They just put it back in the woods and the heck with it. It's way better to get it chipped, get it out of the woods, and yeah, it's absolutely.
So 70%. Okay, great. Thanks, Mike. For
Sure, but
translating.
yes. There could be even more of that wood coming if we work on getting it approved better.
Great. Thanks for being here with us. I'm sure we'll be back in touch if we have any more questions, but right now we're just, as you can tell, we're circling around a question that we assume is going to come to us from the Senate, but, you know, which is the proposed amendment. So we're just trying to get ready to, you know, if when the bill comes over from the Senate, our committee will be asked to take a straw poll just on the Rygate portion. So we're just getting ready.
Well, I brought my business cards. If anyone has questions for me, I'm happy
Great.
to answer them.
Thank you.
And I really appreciate your attention today and your questions. And let's down there. And I'm available. Happy to answer any questions. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Forest Parks and Rec, right?
Correct.
Okay.
See you guys.
Yeah, if you want to sit in the corner, you can sit.
I'm okay. I'll
You're good?
Yeah, I'm sitting now. Thank you.
Great. Is that working?
There you go.
Yeah, for the record.
Sure. Thank you very much, Chair. For the record, my name is Oliver Pearson. I'm the Director of the Division of Forest within Forest Park and Rec. Happy to speak to you today about FPR's perspective on Rygate and the Vermont forest products industry. Have a few slides I'll get through, but happy to take questions as well. I figure out how to advance. That's great. So sort of the big picture of what I'm going to share with you today is in this one slide, the points that are italicized, I'm not going to go into, other speakers will or have already gone into those. But essentially Rygate provides a market for whole tree wood chips, about 250,000 tons per year. As was mentioned, wood chips are considered a low grade wood harvest material for which markets are currently limited in Vermont. But for landowners and loggers, these markets for low grade wood material are essential for both the economic viability of forest management, as well as ensuring that sustainable forest management and forest health gains that are achieved through forest management are viable. On that sustainability piece, Rygate harvesting follows some of the most stringent procedures in the state for forest management, which I'll talk about, to ensure that the lands that supply wood to the plant are managed sustainably. I'll just briefly touch on these 3 points. We do get into the issue frequently of wood energy, biomass energy, and all we're going to say on that for this hearing is that biomass electricity is renewable from our perspective. It's preferable to burning fossil fuels, and it keeps money in Vermont in terms of the cost of purchasing energy. As was mentioned, it's our understanding that payment of loggers has improved in the last year as a result of Act 142 and some of the actions taken by Rygate and Mr. St. Ange. FPR supports increasing the efficiency of Rygate's operations, which is being contemplated under this bill. But really, the big point for us is that maintaining Rygate's operations is very important for Vermont's forest economy. So briefly, Vermont is between 76 and 78% forested, depending on what data source you use. It's about 4.5 million acres. Ownership is about 80% private, and it's largely, but not entirely, it's largely private lands that are supplying chips to Rygate. We have a nice northern hardwood mix of beech, birch, and maple, but about 7% of our forests that come from that forest type. And then some of our higher elevation, more northerly forests are pines and spruce. And most of Vermont's forests are mature. So we don't have a lot of old growth forests in Vermont. We have forests that are between 40 and 80 years old predominantly, with some younger forests coming back up as a result of forest management activities. Folks often want to know what's happening with forest cover change in Vermont. So I'm sharing some data from the U.S. Forest Service Forest Inventory and Analysis data set. But essentially, Vermont saw a rapid expansion from the turn of the century until about 1997 of our forest cover. And the forest cover peaked in 1997 at, almost 4.65 million acres. We've been losing forest at a slow rate since 1997, so over the last 26 years or so, at about the rate of 5,000 acres per year. So conversion of forests to other uses remains an issue. If you just look at the last 10 years over here, that rate of forest loss has slowed down, which is great. And I think that's a result of more recently of efforts like Act 59, conservation easements, and efforts to manage forests more sustainably to get more value out of our forests. And so as from the perspective of Forest Parks and Recs, really focused on maintaining working lands and maintaining forest cover, and helping private landowners, our own lands, and federal partners manage forests sustainably and in a manner that's economically viable. Just a brief shot about the importance of Vermont's wood products industry to the state. This is somewhat dated information from a 2017 study, but it's the forest products industry at that time was contributing over 9,000 direct jobs, 1.4 billion in total economic contribution annually to the state's economy, and about 300 million in direct labor income. When you look at total contributions of the wood product sector with some multipliers in indirect labor, indirect value-added processing work, that total economic contributions up to over 2 billion. And then what I'll say is the sale of wood chips to Reigate and McNeil are foundational elements of the Vermont forest economy because they allow landowners and loggers to extract as much value as possible from sustainably managed forests so that the types of management activities are possible. I'll just add that these figures have likely decreased a bit since 2017 due to the many challenges in the sector around markets, around access to the woods because of climatic issues, but they're probably still in the same order of magnitude. Please.
Just a question, are folks able to sell chips to McNeil and Reigate from all over the state? Or is there, if you imagine drawing a circle around each plant, there's a 50-mile radius or 100?
They can sell from all over the state. There's no sort of division of only chips from one place can go to one of the two biomass electricity plants.
And they're able to truck them up or get them up there if they're from in the southern part of the state, or?
I'm certainly aware of chips from the southwest Vermont going up that sort of western corridor of Vermont and supplying McNeil. And I'm sure McNeil prefers to buy chips more from that closer wood basket, if you use that term, but chips do come to McNeil from all over the state.
Okay. Just curious.
And so this is sort of some of the things we were talking about earlier. There's many aspects of sustainable forest management when it comes to wood utilization. Utilizing all parts of the tree is the goal. And so the main trunk of the tree is used for saw logs, veneer logs, and other sort of more high value wood products. As you get further up the trunk, it can be used for pulpwood, firewood, fuel wood, and other products. And sort of the low grade material that we've been talking about for Reigate to make the whole tree wood chips comes from branches, limbs, crowns, and not so much in the case of Reigate, but you can make whole tree wood chips from waste from mills as well. So this is important because without demand for low grade woody material, there wouldn't be a market for the sort of branches, limbs, et cetera, that are left once the more valuable saw logs and veneer log main stem of a tree is extracted. In terms of your question about how much, Representative Campbell's question about how much is left, what percentage would be left if it wasn't for Reigate, I think Mr. St. Ange answered 70%. And that really varies depending on the forest management plan that a given licensed forester and landowner have put in place. In some cases, it's preferable to leave dead wood behind. In some cases, it's preferable to leave it out. But I think in a lot of cases, we want to have a varied approach and get some of that low grade material out. And having a market for that is really essential. I'll get into that a little bit more in a second here. So what is the link between Reigate's demand for chips and good forest management? So as required by Reigate's Certificate of Public Good, suppliers to the plant must follow a harvesting policy that's been approved by Public Utility Commission, Forest Parks and Rec, and Fish and Wildlife. As I said, these harvesting policies are most of the most stringent regulations required of any purchaser of forest products in Vermont. They include wildlife habitat assessments for fish and wildlife biologists, as well as site visits, strict adherence to the acceptable management practices to ensure that water quality is maintained, protection of archaeological sites, and use of scientific silvicultural practices, including very limited patch cuts or clear cuts on sites where wood is being supplied to Reigate. Just recently, the legislature asked the Agency of Natural Resources to recommend updates to the harvesting policy to promote sustainable forests and the forest economy. Those recommendations were completed last May, and the updates haven't been finalized yet between the Public Utility Commission and Reigate, but we hope that Reigate's new owners will be willing to see that update to the harvesting policy through, because we did make some tweaks to ensure that the latest principles of good sustainable forest management were incorporated.
Yeah, Victoria.
So would that be in the form of updating the MOU?
Correct. Yeah. And so, as I said, we submitted we worked very closely with Reigate, with Fish and Wildlife, with other stakeholders. We submitted our recommendations for what updates should be made last May, and we just haven't gotten across the finish line yet, but we're close to doing it. And I spoke with my colleague, John Austin, who's the wildlife director at Fish and Wildlife, and he gave me this really interesting information. In the last 9 years, Fish and Wildlife reviews of Reigate chip harvests, and there's 1,400 reviews. So Fish and Wildlife biologists are actively going out to these sites, had resulted in determining that lands providing chips are protecting thousands of acres of deer wintering areas, threatened endangered species habitat, wetland protection, bear habitat, and significant natural communities. So what this means is these lands will be sort of classified as privately owned forests. They're able to harvest wood sustainably, but also achieve these other important wildlife benefits. And that's sort of the interest that Fish and Wildlife has in going out and visiting these sites. So this is sort of an unexpected benefit of sustainable forest management for land supplying Reigate with chips that I thought it was important to share with the community. So Reigate's role in Vermont's forest economy, it's uses pulled tree chips to generate 20 megawatts of electricity. They purchase around 250,000 tons of chips per year. As Mr. St. Ange said, they're sourced from many loggers. The report from 23 to 24 for those 12 months shows that chips were sourced from 90 loggers. 31% were from Vermont, 55% from New Hampshire, the rest from Massachusetts and Connecticut. So Vermont loggers provided 82,500 tons of chips at about $40 per ton. So there's 3.3 million in direct payments to Vermont loggers for these chips, which is a lot when you think about, that otherwise this wood would probably be left behind in the woods. That percentage that's being supplied by Vermont has gone down. About 5 years ago, when the contingency report for closing Reigate was published, it was up around 50%. And there's a couple of reasons for that. I think largely supply from Vermont loggers overall has decreased. The amount of time loggers have been able to get into the woods has decreased in the last 2 years because of very wet summers and warm winter. What you can see in this chart is this blue line is the total harvest from 2018 to 2022, with a decrease in the amount of pulp and saw logs that have been harvested in Vermont. And that's actually decreased even more in 23 and 24. So I think that just the decreases in supply because of difficult conditions for loggers have led to that decrease that's coming from Vermont for Reigate, and perhaps more coming from New Hampshire and outside the state. But we'd like to get that back up. And there's some data on climate that sort of shows what we think is contributing to that decrease. I'll move on. So in general, markets for low-grade wood, the kind that supplies Reigate, are limited in Vermont. Whole tree wood chips for power generation is one of the largest markets. What's called bowl wood chips and pellets for heating is another significant market. Pulp for paper making, that's really gone down with the closure of pulp mills, as was alluded to. And then unshipped logs can provide firewood, but most of the firewood is not from the branches and stems because they're just too thin. So that's a very small percentage of low-grade wood can be used for firewood. So demand for low-grade wood has decreased over the last 10 years with the closure of pulp plants, paper mills, and power generation facilities in the region. And so today, Reigate and McNeil collectively purchased the largest amount of low-grade wood from Vermont loggers and landowners. And so this is our 2022 harvest report, which shows that about 17% of all wood harvested in Vermont in 2022 went to McNeil and Reigate, which so it shows that they play a pretty outsized role, given that just two plants, in supporting Vermont's forest economy. So just a few more slides. Sustainable forest management focuses on improving the future forests, ensuring regeneration takes place, ensuring water quality, habitat, soils all protected. So in addition to the economics supporting the removal of low-grade timber, Reigate enables active forest management with science-based silviculture. So the harvests that supply wood to Reigate are part of providing a diverse set of wood products. And there's no such thing as a low-grade harvest. So as was alluded to, Nobody goes in and says, I'm just going to get low grade wood out, supply Rygate or to provide chips. Those are ancillary products from a broader forest management harvest. And although that generates limited revenue for the landowner, it's critical to supporting the landowner's desired outcomes, because that additional payment for the low grade wood allows landowners and loggers to get in there and do all these other important things that we achieve through active forest management, such as enhanced wildlife habitat, improving forest health, increasing resiliency to climate change, providing durable wood products, etc. And by removing the lower grade wood, which is sometimes small and stunted trees or monoculture of the same species that's growing well, you can then lead to growth of higher grade timber and higher value wood products, which is frequently a landowner's objective in Vermont. So sort of wrapping up, markets for low grade wood are essential for sustainable forest management. Harvesting of low grade wood material supports the entire wood product sector in Vermont. When these markets are absent, forest management goals are difficult to achieve. So it's really important to maintain these markets. And while the value of timber used for wood chip production is lower on a per ton basis compared to other wood products, these sales help loggers' financial margins be maintained. And as Mr. Nate St. Ange alluded to, it's very tight out there. So giving landowners and loggers the ability to sell all parts of a tree is very important. Wood chip production uses mechanized harvesting techniques typically, and those are safer, more environmentally friendly, more efficient harvesting lower value trees. So we're happy to see that connection there. So last slide, I just wanted to share some of the data from the contingency report that looked at what happened if Rygate closed. So should the Rygate power station close, there's no other readily available market for the whole tree chips it consumes. These alternative markets don't exist today. There is a developer is exploring a sort of wood chip to energy power plant in Linden. That's years from being activated and still struggling over the standard offer issues with the PUC. So we don't know if that will ever get going. And so there isn't really other markets for wood chips besides Rygate and McNeil. And if Rygate did close, it's unlikely the new enterprise would start and utilize the existing plant and staff on that site. So the contingency report found that if the plant closes, about 7.5 of Vermont's electricity, about 160,000 megawatt hours of base load wouldn't be generated. Depending on the year, between 80,000 and 130,000 tons of chips would not be purchased from Vermont loggers, and $14 million of economic activity related to the purchase of chips would not take place. And from our standpoint as forest, there's the loss of a major low grade wood market would make executing sustainable forest management plans much more difficult. So, Chair, that's my last slide. I'm happy to take any questions if you or the committee members have.
Questions from the committee?
Well, gee, I'll ask a question.
There we go. Rep. Torrey and then Campbell.
Oh,
Mine-
sure.
With your A&R hat on, Rygate must have some sort of air quality permit.
They do. Yeah. So that was as they were exploring these different options to become efficient. They did need to obtain a DEC air quality permit, and they have obtained that related to the efficiency requirements that they're hoping to achieve. So that is one of the many permits that is, I think, complete and sort of behind them as they move forward with implementing these efficiency requirements. And as we working on this upgrade to the MOU a year ago, something that we were very looking at very closely to make sure that they were going to get that along with Act 50 and other things, and this has been obtained.
Rep. Campbell?
Sure. Oliver, didn't we meet at a tree giveaway in St. Johnsbury?
We did. Yeah, at the school with my colleague Gwen, and thank you for coming by and supporting that event.
You look different in a tie. So I think on your last slide, or I don't know, one of your last slides, you refer to whole tree chipping, and I think that's one of the confusing things for those of us who aren't, sort of in the industry. The wood that is chipped is really a byproduct of higher grade harvesting, right?
Correct.
So you use the tops of trees, the portion of the tree that's not usable for a saw log, and then if there are sort of collateral damage to small trees, you need to thin out small trees in order to facilitate the growth of healthier trees. That's where you get whole trees from. Is that right?
That's where we get the chips from. Yeah, I'm showing this slide, but correct. when the forester develops the silvicultural prescription or the sort of forest management plan, they might say, we want to get this type of tree out because it's mature. There's too many of one species. If we can, open up a patch here, get some trees out, that'll improve resiliency to different sort of climate change threats. And so they'll make a plan to harvest certain trees. And then from an economic standpoint, they'll say, great, the main trunk we can sell as saw logs or veneer. There's a clear market for that. And then what's left behind, they can either try to sell it as whole tree chips and do the chipping. They could try to sell it to a pulp buyer, but those are decreasing in number, and you have to go all the way to New York. And so trucking it that far for pulp isn't super viable. There's sometimes you want to leave some of it behind. I mean, leaving dead wood, leaving snags has certain benefits for wildlife. And so a good silvicultural prescription would probably specifically say, leave some amount of woody material that's dead or has been harvested behind, but get some out, because if you leave too much, that can impede regeneration and cause other challenges. So yes, it's the branches, the limbs, the crowns that are then chipped up and converted into whole tree chips for the purposes of supplying ragate and everything else.
Okay, great. And then you answered, or you also addressed the question about the proportion of chips that come from wood that would have otherwise been left behind to rot on the forest floor. But I didn't quite catch what you said about that. So I think Dan said something around 70%, and you said it varies.
Yeah, I think Dan's very close to the industry, so that I have no reason to disagree with his number. I think we look at that as the forester will sit down with the landowner and come up with a plan that decides what to do with limbs, branches from a harvested tree. And it's preferable to get a lot of it out and sell it from an economic standpoint. And as I said, there's some benefits to leaving a bit behind, but getting some of that dead wood out has benefits too. So you sort of want to find the right balance there. So to me, it's difficult for us to say, how much would be left behind if there wasn't ragate, because foresters, landowners would probably look at, we want to get some out. How far do we have to truck it to sell it, get any kind of return on that part of the tree?
Well, I think one of the questions that is of interest to those of us who are thinking about the carbon impact of burning biomass for electricity is, it sounds like a lot of that carbon is going to be released into the atmosphere anyway, because that wood's going to sit on the forest floor and rot.
Yeah, that's correct. It might be over a longer time scale, instead of being, released on burning upon combustion relatively quickly. It might be a number of years, but those smaller branches, limbs, et cetera, will rot much more quickly than, say, the main stem of the trunk, which could be around for decades.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Representative Lipsky, did you want to chime in?
Yeah, for the record, Jed Lipsky, this is really to Scott's question, but it's in educational comments to the committee in general. What Representative Campbell was asking about, what is whole tree chipping? What it is, whole tree harvesting is a harvesting system where the tree is severed from the stump, put in groups, and is then generally grapples skidded en masse, maybe 7 or 8 trees, or there's small trees, maybe 15 from the stump in that region. It could be a mile away or a half a mile away. One trip out brings the entire forest product to a landing. And most whole tree operators have what's called a slasher saw, which is a system to convert the entire stem into products based on their highest and best value, quality saw logs. And that slasher saw, if you can picture this, has a very large loader, and it can reach 100 feet or 75 feet and sort to the highest and best use. They also have a whole tree chipper where they feed it in, and those chips are blown into a box trailer that immediately go to a local market. So there are sorts for the highest and best value, it is not economically feasible to sever 33% of the least valuable portion of the tree to leave it in the woods and then go back a mile and collect the lowest grade. So there's a carbon factor to that in terms of energy utilized to harvest. You're doubling your costs and your carbon footprint by doubling the distance you have to travel. So it's a very it's mechanized system for efficiency. And the other thing you need to understand is that if you're trucking from Windham County to Reigate, or you're trucking from Bennington County to McNeil, you're traveling 170 miles one way. And that's a greater emission and greenhouse gas loading. So having local markets, one on each side, one in the Champlain Valley, one in the Connecticut River Valley, really has a carbon efficiency and lowers the Vermont footprint. But there are other systems of logging, and I think as Commissioner or Director Pearson has alluded to, because 80% of Vermont's forests are privately owned, you need to consider the goals and aesthetics is part of it, regeneration habitat, wildlife habitat. So every forest plan considers the complex values that are gained and necessary for climate resiliency, for biodiversity, and all the other intrinsic values that our society requires and needs out of our forests. So I just wanted to be educational in describing the efficiency of what's called whole tree harvest, which is how you get this 30% of the tree sort of byproduct into a usable value. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you, Representative.
If a landowner didn't use good forestry practice, would the landowner's forest degrade over time or generations?
Sure. I think going back a few decades, there was a common forest management practice called high grading, where you would just take out sort of the best quality trees. And that had disadvantages for regeneration. When you remove all the best quality trees, they're not around to provide seeds for the ensuing generation. So that's just one example. But yes, if a landowner is creating a lot of erosion by putting a skinner up a steep hillside without proper water bars, without a proper skid tree on a logging road, that can create problems with soil compaction, and that'll in turn impede regeneration of the forest. So those are just two examples, but the answer to your question is yes. And that's so the Reigate harvesting procedures, as I mentioned, are very stringent, including using the mechanized approach for whole tree harvesting that Representative Lipsky described, get us away from those types of problems. And what's really remarkable is when after the harvest, typically there's still a closed canopy. They've selectively harvested certain trees, but they've left some behind. And that's how it achieves all those wildlife benefits that I alluded to in all the questions.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for your time. Appreciate it. Let's see now. We have folks waiting in the room, and I think waiting online. Jack, did you say that we have someone waiting in the Zoom room?
Yeah, Dana Duran, I just admit him.
Okay, great. Do you want to go ahead? Okay. Is that okay? Great. We're gonna have Dana testify next since he's been waiting so patiently in the Zoom room. So, Mr. Duran, let us know when you're here and ready.
Can we take down the screen share?
Yes, I will do that.
Thanks.
I got it.
Great. Okay.
Jack, I'll keep you out. Yeah. I apologize. I'm gonna have to step out in about 8 minutes for a meeting.
Okay.
2:30.
Great. Sounds good. Hi, Mr. Duran.
Hi, good afternoon. Can you hear me okay?
We can. Yeah, if you could identify yourself for the record, it's over to you.
Okay, wonderful. Well, good afternoon, Chair James, Ranking Member Sibilia, members of the House Committee on Energy and Digital Infrastructure. My name is Dana Duran, and I'm the Executive Director of a nonprofit educational association called Professional Logging Contractors of the Northeast, of which, in the interest of full disclosure, Representative Lipsky is in the room. He is a full-fledged member of ours, just so that you are aware, as a logging contractor in Vermont. It's a pleasure to appear before you today in support of Section 33 of what is hopefully draft H 319, an act relating to miscellaneous environmental subjects. I've got my written testimony that I've submitted to you. I can run through that if that's appropriate, unless you wanted to just skip through a few things. I know you've been at it for a long time, and I don't want to be redundant.
No, that's okay. We can just run through it. That's the best, and folks can ask questions as you go along, if that's all right for you.
Okay, sounds good. Well, appreciate the opportunity. I'm over in the state of Maine right now. I would have headed over, but I did not get the invite until late yesterday afternoon. So, just in the interest of time, that's why I'm online. So, as I mentioned before, as background, our organization is an educational nonprofit. We were created in 1995 to represent logging and associated trucking contractors throughout the state of Maine. In May 2023, we expanded our organization, changed our name, and now we've got three voting board members from the state of Vermont, including Sam Lincoln from Lincoln Farm Timber Harvesting in Randolph Center, Jack Bell from Longview Forest in Heartland, and Gabe Russo, Southwind Forestry in Pollitt. And we also have right now 28 contractor members from the state of Vermont. So as this committee knows, timber harvesting and hauling are distinct and impactful components of the rural economy in Vermont. Occupations from the logging and trucking industry are inextricably linked to the health and long-term management of Vermont's forests, which you heard from Mr. Pearson, cover 75% of the state. The state's reliance on healthy forests requires focus and engagement on policies and programs that support a strong and vibrant forest economy. However, timber harvesting and hauling contractors in Vermont are at a crossroads right now. While this past winter was relatively normal from a weather and operational perspective, the past 2 years, or past two winters and summers, spring and fall, have not been normal, with warm, wet, and variable weather patterns. Additionally, markets and inflation are also not normal. In 2024, Vermont experienced the closure of three important markets for low-grade wood and high-grade wood, I should say, including Putney Paper in Putney, A. Johnson in Bristol, and Mill River in Clarendon. These closures are additive to the low-grade market struggles that have occurred in Maine over the last decade. So adding insult to injury for contractors has been inflation on equipment, parts, wages, labor over the last 5 years, upwards of 40%. And in the last 4 months alone, as a result of tariffs on steel and other imported components, as well as fuel, contractors are questioning their viability and path forward. So let me move to wood for energy. So wood for energy in Vermont is vital for so many reasons that you've heard already today. I do want to remind you that the building you are sitting in right now, along with all state-owned buildings in downtown Montpelier, are actually heated with wood. Whether it's for heating members of the legislature on a cold, raw May day like we're seeing today, or providing electricity for homes and businesses, wood energy markets are consequential for landowners, loggers, and forest management. And so forest management can be practiced with a secondary benefit of providing baseload energy that is consistent and on demand for rural Vermonters. The loss of any wood energy market can have catastrophic consequences, both economic and environmental. Wood waste from sawmills, logging, and other operations can pile up and must be disposed of either in landfills or carried back into the forest if markets like Rygate do not exist. The added costs of disposal, combined with the loss of revenue from the sale of biomass, could cripple many sawmills and in turn our members' logging operations south. Further, our forests, which are healthier than they have ever been, could be impacted by the loss of any market as a result of altered management and the introduction of pests, disease, and forest fires. With all that has been invested in Vermont to create one of the strongest markets in the Northeast, certainly no one wants to see our forests deteriorate like they have in the Northwestern United States. I stand before you today to state honestly and directly that the logging community's relationship with Rygate has been vital, but it has also been tenuous. The prior ownership of the facility did not demonstrate good corporate accountability from our perspective. I can also tell you that from my experience dealing with them in Maine and New Hampshire, as well as in Vermont, that while our members wanted the facility to always operate successfully, we also wanted to see the prior ownership move on. It now appears that this has occurred, and perhaps this is the lifeline that the facility needed to ensure its success. As most of you know, in 2023 and 2024, the ownership of Rygate was before the General Assembly requesting relaxed deadlines and the movement of the goalpost to retain their purchase power agreement. During both attempts, our membership supported them, but also made it known that they were not keeping up their end of the bargain by paying bills on time, ensuring accurate delivery equipment at the facility, and acting with honesty and integrity. As a result, the legislature took action to ensure that if a public benefit would be offered, Rygate must act accordingly. In 2024, the legislature passed Act 142, including Section 19, and I've attached all of Act 142, but I would from last legislative session, but it just pays specific attention to Section 19. That stated specifically that if Rygate was going to be given additional time on their PPA for compliance, they must demonstrate sound business practices by paying contractors on time and ensuring that they have a contract. While there shouldn't be a need for this to be legislated, it was included in statute per our request. We believe then, as we believe now, that this market is vital for the rural economy and it should benefit all who ensure its success. Based upon the reports provided to the Department of Public Service and to the General Assembly since then, and from feedback from our members, it appears that Rygate has been complying with the letter of the law, and we feel that they are now upholding their end of the bargain. Additionally, it appears that this new ownership of the facility now exists. If this ownership can ensure integrity by not only paying contractors, but also making the required investments in the facility to meet their statutory efficiency requirements, we are very supportive of the legislation that is before you today to extend their time frame of compliance by 1 year. The facility is vital for so many of the because of the aforementioned reasons, and it is the PLC's perspective that while our members do not own the facility, they are key contributors and a primary link to the chain that ensures its success. For these reasons, we hope you move this legislation forward before the end of the session to keep this important market alive. I'm happy to answer any questions, and again, appreciate the opportunity to be before you today.
Thank you. Questions?
I don't have any.
Okay,
Thank you, Dana.
no questions. Thank you very much, Dana.
You're welcome. Good to see all of you.
Sure.
Thank you.
Real quick.
Okay,
Real quick.
great. Sounds good. Next up, yes, for the record.
For the record, Gwen Zakoff, I'm the lobbyist for the Vermont Forest Products Association. Happy to be with you. I'll make it really quick, and it's really easy being last after everyone before me because they outlined everything that's important about the extension for the Rygate power plant for the wood products industry. So the Vermont Forest Products Association represents pretty much the entirety of the working forest industry. So we represent, everything from sawmills to loggers to foresters to truckers to manufacturing facilities, wood processors, even biomass facilities. And as the prior testimony pointed out, the importance of a low-grade wood market in the state of Vermont can't be understated. Obviously for the ecological reasons, but also the economic reasons of keeping our industry alive and creating an actual market for this super low-grade wood that's coming out of our forests. And as has been pointed out before, there's really only two places for this wood to go. It's going to be either McNeil or it's going to be Rygate. That's the sort of lowest of the low grade. The kind of upper low grade would be a wood that could go to Vermont pellet for fuel heat. If you lose Rygate, it creates a huge domino effect, and it will be a huge impact on an industry that's really already struggling. So I kind of look at the entire system as sort of an endangered species, and so one goes under, the pressure on everyone else is pretty severe, and there really are no other markets to go to unless you're going out of state. And then we're seeing in other markets, particularly in New Hampshire, we're seeing a lot of these facilities closing down, and there's no market for this low grade wood. So our association is in full support of this extension and keeping Rygate online, and we hope that the community agrees.
I do have kind of a long range question when you think about, when you mention endangered species and think about the long-term prospects for, super low grade wood that seems to be only useful right now to be burned. What is the long-term, what's going to happen to that low grade wood in the future as biomass, transitions out of the market? I mean, what's the plan?
That's a great question, and we're seeing in other states. Maine is one great example, and probably Dana Stellani can speak to it. But there are alternative markets being developed for really fun, unique, technologically advanced wood products. They're just not happening in Vermont because we just don't have that kind of
volume.
Well, volume, and also it takes a lot of investment and money to sort of get these sort of startups up and going. There was mention of the Lyndonville plant that's potentially using biochar. So there are some smaller alternative markets, but there are alternative markets popping up in other states. It's just not happening so much in Vermont. We're not really an incubator for that, I would say. But I'm not an expert on that, so I would definitely talk to the departments. I know they have a lot more information on that. But there could be other markets that are developed, but you have to, it's like tariffs, right? You get rid of, if you have tariffs in place and you're like, oh, let's build manufacturing, it takes time. So if we want to create new markets for low grade wood, you have to do it now in order for it to be a reality, many years down the line. So
Any other questions?
So
Yeah.
Jan's got back on the screen here, like maybe he's got something to say. Or Dina.
Yeah.
Is it all right if I chime in on that question?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, so to Gwen's point, I think I don't think, I mean, these projects are happening with respect to low grade wood, and I'll bring up something that I'll talk about all of the kind of potentials that are happening now, also on the horizon for the use of low grade. But I also want to just point to a project that already exists that's similar to what the current ownership of Rygate is potentially trying to do. So there's a pellet mill in Maine owned by a family called the Linkletter family in Athens, Maine, called Maine Woods Pellet. And they actually use they have a combined heat and power plant that's co-located with their pellet facility. So they buy in biomass, and then what they do with their biomass is they actually sift that biomass to pull out any feedstock that's appropriate for pellets. But then they also have a preheating system where they dry their chips before they send those chips both over for biomass, but also for their pellet production. So there is technology that already exists in New England that if the committee wanted to go on a road trip this summer, I would point you in that direction. And the Linkletters are members of ours. But then let me also point to the other low grade markets that are happening currently. You've got Timber HP in Madison, Maine, that is producing insulation out of wood fiber, low grade wood fiber, that are predominantly sawmill residuals that have no other home. You've got biofuel companies, actually a company called Ensign that makes an alternative to natural gas for Bates College. And there's also a hospital in Concord, New Hampshire, that uses their biocrude. It's made out of 100% wood fiber. And then you've also got companies that are essentially going to be replacing plastics with low grade wood. So there's a lot on the horizon that's already in production, already through R&D, that should be at full scale production within the next 5 years. So the good news is there are things coming, but again, it's always a question of timing, and global markets obviously right now are a little unhinged. So we don't know what that time frame looks like.
And if I could.
Thank you. Rep.
if I
Kleppner
could
and
add-
then
I
Campbell.
know, but I just wanted to add that my brother and I have a construction project now, and we are insulating it with Timber HP's product.
Nice.
So it truly is, and I'm not just saying this because they're a market, but it truly is a remarkable product. It's easy to work with. It's 100% wood fiber. There's no fiberglass. There are no issues with what you breathe in. It's easy to work with. You don't need gloves. You're not going to be left itching. You're not going to cough. You're not going to wheeze. So from a sustainability standpoint, environmental health wise, I mean, you couldn't talk about a greater product right now.
Yeah, we're pretty excited about it.
Rep. Campbell.
Yes, well, that was my question too. Are there any other products that could use this low-grade wood, that, products we could make that don't involve, combusting it? So wood fiber insulation, but I think you mentioned that was mostly sawmill sawdust, basically. But do they make, I just don't know. Do they make chipboard or something like that out of this material, or is that something else?
No, you're spot on, Representative Campbell. So there's a gentleman named John Godfrey, the old J facility where International Paper was in Maine, inevitably became owned by Pixel. They had two digesters that blew up. I don't know if you remember, in April of 2020. Which effectively shut that facility down. But a gentleman named John Godfrey is potentially going to build a new OSB plant in Jay, Maine on that very site. And that's going to use pine pulp. So again, using low grade wood. But I'll go back to, and I know Representative Campbell, you brought it up before about, burning and carbon impact. So I can send this committee an interesting study that was done by the Maine Department of Environmental Protection that actually has determined that wood that is burned for whatever use, whether that's home heating, energy, biomass electric, combined heat and power, however it's utilized, is carbon neutral, because that wood is naturally occurring already in the environment. You're not taking it out of the ground, so it's already in the atmosphere. And then that same wood fiber is either going to rot and decay and create methane and off gas, or you could burn it, which creates carbon dioxide, but it's not a carcinogen, and it is an irritant, but it doesn't have any negative health offset. So I'd be happy to send it to this committee because it does prove that what's happening at Rygate, what's happening at McNeil is essentially, it is carbon neutral from that perspective.
Well, it's neutral over a time frame of decades, and as opposed to millennia, which or more, whatever millions of years are.
Sure.
In the case of fossil fuels, but even better than burning it would be sequestering it in a product, in a building somehow. So that's sort of a side issue as far as the bill is concerned, but I'm just curious about it since you seem to know so much about it. Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks to both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gwen.
And I submitted written testimony, so it should be posted on here.
Great, thank you. It perhaps is posted. Our committee assistant is.
No, he posted it.
Oh, great. I was gonna say he's moved on to his summer job of organic farming.
Just want to say thank you.
Thanks for coming, Rep. Lipsky, and I think we have our final witness waiting in the Zoom room.
Yep.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you.
So you are calling on Heath?
Yes.
Heath is being admitted.
Great.
Can you hear me?
We can. Heath, are you able to turn on your camera or no?
I'm trying. It doesn't seem to be
Uh,
I don't know. Is that any better? Doesn't seem,
No, I'm not sure.
I don't know.
I mean, I think it's fine if it's a.
Anyway,
if it's a
we'll get somewhere here.
for the record. Oh, there. Hi.
You are.
Hi, Heath.
Hi.
We can see you now.
Hi, everyone.
If you could introduce yourself for the record, that'd be great. And then we're looking forward to hearing your perspectives.
My name is Heath Bunnell. I own a logging business called HB Logging. And I work in Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine. And I live in Kirby, Vermont, where I also have another business called Kirby Mulch. It's a I'd say that, I've been logging for, all my life, for most of it anyways. And then I'm a third generation, and, possibly fourth. I'd say as fourth generation, honestly, but full-time logging at third for sure. So what I'd like to talk about is, what I was just listening to. The alternative markets are good, but if we're going to manage the forest that we have in Vermont, we can't rely on them. They are not consistent enough. They don't use enough volume to market the low grade that we produce with our timber sales, which we're working for the landowners. And that basically stops fragmentation of the properties, like developments and stuff like that, because landowners are able to hold on to the properties by management. So I'll take, for instance, my mulch company, which we have playground chips. We do large scale chip deliveries for, blueberry fields or private landowners or private people with one bush come in and pick up 5-gallon pails of it. But I run about 20, I'd say right around 200 tractor trailer loads of material between my mulch business and that annually. And, and it's probably close to as big as it will be, maybe grow a little bit, depending on how I don't really truck my materials to Connecticut. I'm used to sell my materials within 60 miles, like in New Hampshire and Vermont for the most part. So what I would find, if I was to take my logging business, that I wouldn't be able to run full steam. I wouldn't be able to actually go from one property to another. And most of my properties are working with consultant foresters, probably about 90% working for a private landowner. So sorry about the phone call here. Let's shut this so, and so we need facilities like Rygate, Rygate and Burlington Electric, very important. But without it, we can't, the price of the material, so like if we were to lose Rygate, and then we still had Burlington, and we have some others in New Hampshire, like Whitefield Power, and we have the Burlington, Berlin mill. The price doesn't pay to drive that. You can't move the material, which is the chips, the biomass, pretty much anything over 50 miles. So, it would really mean that, that basically the eastern part of the state would be stagnant, with no low grade, especially with the way pulp is being, we're not able to sell pulp for the most part. Not enough to operate. Everybody's on quota, and really on the global market, that's a global market. So we don't really know what direction that's going to go here in the near future. So, we really need Rygate, and we need the alternative, markets as well, like my mulch business and all those little niches that Dana was talking about. That's what we need to do, but we need to have more of a bigger scale, alternative, not alternative, but an outlet for our product, in the in-house, in state, just relying on the global market or a large entity to come in and buy a mill that's in New Hampshire or New York, really isn't sustainable. We're not going to, as a state, we won't be able to function and manage the properties. Anybody have any questions?
Right. Does anybody have any questions? Rep Southworth.
How many people do you employ? And if something happened with Rygate, what do you envision happening with your employees?
Right now, this summer, I have actually put in quite a few solar fields. So in the summer, I will employ close to 30 people. And without the outlets for the wood, I'd have a hard time figuring out because we have markets right now, but I would drop probably to half. You know, the logging business would be pretty much stopped, and I just would be relying on the solar fields, and then we'd probably just do construction work, and then we'd end up maybe keeping my employees busy in the winter if we could, is what happened to me, I would imagine. So
Thank you.
Brett Campbell?
Thanks. Yeah. Hi, Heath. Good to see you.
Hi.
Yeah.
Likewise.
We'll probably have to pick up some chips in a little while. So I guess I'll ask the same question of you that I asked of some other folks. Well, it sounds like, first of all, that if you can't chip up the tops and the branches and whatever,
Right.
it really effectively puts a kibosh on you being able to do a logging operation, because you need that revenue in order to make the whole thing pencil out.
Right.
Is that fair to say?
It is. And then in certain species, we have to chip more than the tops, you know, say like our, you know, hemlock pulp and pine pulp, you know, the nearest markets are, you know, they're either not buying it on a regular basis, or they're in New York, too far to truck. So
You're chipping the whole tree for those.
Sometimes you're taking the logs out, and then, you know, Rygate is actually the most cost effective alternative for us. Yes.
And the proportion of well, it sounds like you're shaking the whole tree in those, in the case of hemlock and pine, perhaps.
Mm-hmm.
For deciduous trees, you're taking well, the proportion of the tops that you would otherwise leave on the forest,
right,
is 50 or 70% or something like that. It sounds
right.
like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Could be, you know, and then especially right now, I mean, you know, firewood with the hardwood pulp is really our market. You know, we're able to move it to Maine directly, to Sappi directly, but the price just isn't warrant. I mean, I'm actually working in Maine right now, and so so I'm able to send it there. But when I go home to go back to work, you know, we're not going to be able to afford to truck it there for the price that's on the table at the moment. So,
right. Okay, it's been a very informative session today. Thanks.
Thank you very
All
much.
right, Rep. Kleckner.
Is it your sense that the market for pulpwood has declined because of all the newspapers and magazines that have gone out of business, the people who are reading books on Kindles instead of books and so forth?
I would say that definitely added to it. I think there's more to it as well, as just as where we stand globally as a country at our export, you know, and how we're able to import that, you know, the product in. So I think that, you know, between all of that, it's definitely adding. I mean, definitely, you know, everybody's using electronic devices. Not everybody, but most people, you know, and not many people are like me that still read a newspaper, put it that way. So.
Right. Okay. Thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciate your time and your feedback. Jack, why don't we stay on live for 1 sec so that we can just look ahead at the week real quick with the committee on this project. So
thanks, Heath.
yeah, thanks a lot, Heath.
Yeah, and thanks especially for your being willing to put up with legislators over and over and over again. So.
And anytime somebody wants to call me directly, please do. It's 603-991-7144. Thank you very much. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right. So Senate Finance was supposed to vote this out this afternoon. Does anybody know anybody more plugged in than I am? Okay. Well, anyway, it looked like Senate Finance was supposed to vote out 319 this afternoon, so maybe they will. And then did we determine whether it goes to approps? I feel like we talked all this through, but anyway.
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay. So anyway, either to approps or I thought we said maybe approps.
I thought we said it was going to go to
Yeah.
operations.
I think we did say that. Anyway, at whatever point the Senate's done with it, then it'll go onto the House calendar, but I think we were thinking that we had this week to take testimony. So what we have right now, and I just want to make sure everybody's good with this, we've got Department of Economic Development coming in tomorrow at 11:30. We've got Director Poor from DPS coming in Thursday. And then that's it for testimony that we have scheduled right now. And then I scheduled a straw poll vote on Friday. So we'll see how that timing works. I mean, obviously it has to be out of the Senate. But that's what I'm currently thinking, with the thought being that we do our straw poll Friday morning and it's on the floor next week. So that's the plan. So if anybody has questions, comments, things you want to happen differently between now and Friday, definitely let me know. But if I don't hear from anybody, that's what we're doing. Okay, and then tomorrow morning is our long anticipated tour of the Golden Dome. So meet in the lobby at 9 o'clock, and I don't know, wear suitable shoes. I don't even know it. All right, we can go off live now. Jack, thanks for joining us. Have fun.